Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Crane, and I'm the Program Director of the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. And you are listening to a Global Industry Spotlight, a conversational series focused on providing resources and insights for the creative entrepreneur. We are here to connect with you, network, discuss business, and all things creative entrepreneurship. We are streaming live out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, a room designed for Chicago's small business community located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. The Global Industry Spotlight today is on Sharon Tapper, Executive Director of the Music Managers Forum US, former SVP Music Publishing at Razor and Tie Music Publishing, and VP Creative at Kobalt. In 2008, elected to and served on the New York chapter of the Grammys for multiple terms as both governor and secretary. She served 6 consecutive years as co-chair of the New York Chapter Advocacy Committee and remains an active member. In 2019, she was elected to serve on the New York chapter of the Association of Independent Music Publishers, AIMP. 10 years ago, she co-founded the New York City creative community, NYC3. We are really excited to have Sharon here today. Let's bring her into the conversation. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again. We last saw each other in person in Chicago when MMF did a program here, the Chicago Summit. So it's great to have you on the podcast today.
It's great to be back. I just wish we could do this in person because that's
Yeah,
always more fun.
I know. I think there's something. It's really nice doing things in person, and yet with technology, I'm grateful that I can still connect with colleagues that are kind of all over the country or all over the world.
Yeah,
So
completely.
reading your bio and knowing about Music Managers Forum, can you kind of walk us through just the business and what MMF does, and then I kind of want to tie that back a little bit to some of the previous work that I mentioned in your bio. So what does MMF-US do?
So we're the leading trade organization for music managers in the United States. So that essentially means that we represent the interests not only of the managers, but of the creatives and the artists that they represent. And we do that in a number of ways. So we do that through community, education, and advocacy. Those are essentially the pillars of the organization. And although we're in the US, we're also part of another organization. The umbrella organization that we function under is the International Music Managers Forum. And that is an organization that connects us with Music Managers Forum in 65 other countries around the world, which I think is really exciting because it enables us to have a global reach within all of those other markets. And that I think is very unique. And while we're called the Music Managers Forum, we also have an open door policy. You don't have to be a manager to be part of the group. You can just be a music industry professional in any aspect of the industry. You'll be welcome to attend any of our events, attend our webinars, our summits, our community meetups, because we realize that we are part of an ecology. We're part of a world, and we all need one another. We all need connectivity with one another, and without all of those other aspects of the industry, we can't flourish and succeed. So I never want people to think that because they're not a manager that they can't be part of our group.
Yeah, and to add to what you just said, when Sharon and the MMF team came to Chicago, it was really great to have one of the opening panels basically on like how to break into the German market. The international network that you guys have and provide, I think, is really useful, especially because we are living in a global economy, and artists, because of technology, because of streaming, can have access to different music markets, not just within their own cities, but globally. So that I think that's just a great service, that people need to tap into. So when do you become a member of MMF? Like, how does it work? I know you said it's open. You guys put together educational, uh, resources. What does it look like to join, or how do you kind of get involved?
So we see our role as being, we want to level the playing field for everybody. So if it's somebody who's starting out, we have lots of people who don't even realize that they are managers. Like I'm just an artist, it's like, well, do you do your own distribution, marketing? Do you deal with all those aspects of your career yourself? And they're like, yes. It's like, then you self-manage. You are a manager, even if you don't identify in that fashion. So we consider it important to help people have a solid foundation upon which they can be as educated as possible. And that means giving them access to a toolkit, essentially, so they know what their rights are, what they should be collecting. All of that is really important information. And as you mentioned, if you now release a piece of music, it isn't landlocked. It's available to the world, and it's really important to know not only your rights, but also maybe, depending on where you might be reacting elsewhere, okay, what is important in that given marketplace? Because Spotify may not be the predominant DSP there. You have to know, whatever it is, you have to be able to know the landscape in which to function in all of these different territories, and that's really important.
Yeah. And taking your background,
Mhm.
how have you seen the music industry change in terms of, and it seems like you have a lot of, experience in publishing. Like what is some of the big changes that you've seen in your own career?
The changes in the industry have been seismic. I started out working in a recording studio
Right.
in London,
Okay.
and we had and this was pre-home recording studios. So I saw the changes happening there with technology. Obviously, people we were working with some of the biggest artists in the world coming into that studio, and it was incredible to be part of that. But by the same token, technology has impacted every aspect of the industry. I saw it there. When I moved to America, I worked in management for about 12 years. I was blessed to start working at Left Bank Management for many years, and then Gallimari Management. And then when I moved to New York, I was at a company called the Umbrella Group. And, that was all pre-streaming, pre-Napster, everything. Um,
And you were managing artists at that time?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. This is really going to date me. The first project I ever worked on within weeks of landing in the US was Meatloaf Battle of Hell 2.
Nice.
It
That's awesome.
was huge. It was a baptism of fire, and it was
Yeah.
an incredible experience. And we were shooting videos with James Bay. There were
Wow.
times when we blew up planes. we we were we were making $1 million videos. It was a very different industry. And the company that I worked at, the day-to-day people that I was working with, Meatloaf, Richard Marx, the Cranberries. I also worked to
Hold on. So you worked with, I love the Cranberries. It's like,
yeah, we worked
No
with
Need
them.
to Argue for me it's like one of my favorite albums of all time.
It is such a wonderful, wonderful project. I was privileged enough to work with them from Zombie onwards.
Oh, that's awesome.
And bear in mind, I came from the UK. I had no idea the scale of this country. So my first experience was getting on tour buses with these artists and going around the country. And it's like, oh my God, country is vast. That
And
being
can you
okay.
talk a little bit? I want to stop you there. Can you talk a little bit about what like a manager's role was for you, like in that time period? Like what were the main like things that you were focused on or doing or helping the artist with?
Sure. I mean, it varied and it evolved, obviously, as
Mhm.
I grew and evolved. What I would say is I was very fortunate that everybody that I worked with had global careers. So whereas I saw other people really super focused on the US, I was always working with people who were out doing global world tours.
Mm.
I would say for most of my management life, I was working from like 6 in the morning to midnight later every day, because you had to deal with things on all the different time zones. So, I'd work Europe in the morning, America during the day, and Australia and Southeast Asia in the evening, depending on where the bands were at any given time or where a release cycle was. So,
And
you
who are
know,
you calling? Who are you talking to in those
the
different?
labels predominantly, the
Mhm.
booking agents, the venues, making sure, that um, the promotion was happening, depending on which point you were at.
Mhm.
Maybe it was doing the setup for the album. Maybe, that was what you were doing and making sure the interviews were going smoothly, that going through the promo schedule, making sure that everything was being done appropriately. Were they getting the biggest shows? Were they getting the biggest newspapers? Were they getting, sometimes I'd be like, I'm sorry, we're not doing that. We need to do this instead, and make sure everything was working, and going in the right direction. And then, the just the pure logistics of moving a small army of people around the world. And keep in mind, a lot of this was done pre-email. So I
Right.
was faxing, making the phone call. Did you get the guest list? Did you get the schedule? Chasing, hounding the tour managers if I wasn't there myself, and making sure things were happening in a smooth fashion.
Wow.
Getting people to and from radio stations in the early hours of the morning to make sure they were on the radio show. There were so many moving parts. I used to patch people in with their phoners for radio or publications, whatever it was, and so many times people were like, Dolores. I'm like, no, but here's whoever it was in the band I was patching them into, and click, and off
Right.
they went.
Right.
But
And
going back
that's
to technology, we didn't have the ability just to like shoot off an email or have
right.
a device in our hands. It was like you'd have to be in front of something to do it. So yes, it's much easier with technology now, but it's also much more overwhelming.
And so you have this, incredible management experiences and career. Um, and yeah, like you said, you're on the phone, you're doing faxes. And so in you're noticing some of the technology shifts in the studios, you're watching people produce or make records.
Mhm.
How do you see like that shift from then to now? Like what are like for you some of just the 1, 2, 3 of the biggest differences in the industry?
Well, numerous things. You've got the walls coming down as far as the ability to release music. Before it was very clear you needed a label to get the music out. This was pre being able to, you didn't really hear so much about people doing distribution deals directly. Aggregators wasn't a thing. This was pre-streaming. So, the methods by which music was delivered have completely changed. Social media is a whole other job, quite honestly, which we didn't have to do, which is, um, I can see why that's challenging for a lot of people. But it's really important. You can't ignore that now. That's part of our industry and part of our job. And you have to understand it and you have to engage with it and be able to evolve. And it is one of the most singly important things that a manager can do, or else you will just be left behind. You have to constantly try so many things, because there's so much choice now, and there is no one size fits all. There
Yeah.
never was, but now this the options available are just so wide. It's important to be as educated as possible about every aspect of the industry. And as an artist manager, you're always the hub of the wheel around which everything rotated. But it's a lot more complex, and the streams of income have changed. Quite honestly, you used to get those publishing check, the record company check. Now it's like it's become a lot more complex, because you have income coming in from all these other streams. I mean, the streams have shrunk, but there's a lot more streams, so you have to be a lot more thorough about everything. Everything has to be super sewn up.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. I think there's kind of two sides of the coin. It's like you have this moment in time where artists are empowered to build their own careers. The walls have come down, like you said. The access points are easier, but it's now you have a ton of options. Income is tougher, right? Streaming is you can't make a living off of streaming unless you're at a certain bracket, which is not majority of musicians. I think digital marketing or social media marketing is a full-time position. So is it, and an artist, most of the time, a musician, I mean, they can do a little bit of it, but in terms of what it takes to be effective on those, I mean, on whatever platform you're using, you need a plan. So it almost feels like, and do you see this where managers are taking over the marketing? I mean, they're the logistical part, but they're also kind of leading marketing, or do you see that as like a separate piece?
It was always part of the job anyway.
Okay.
Quite honestly, we would go in and sit with all the teams in the label, whether it was rock, marketing, radio, now social media. You would do that anyway, but you would also, and quite honestly, even then, you would figure out, okay, where are the holes? Where is something that isn't working quite right that we need to fill, and fill those voids? And that's equally as important as what is working, what isn't working, and how do you fix it? And that really is the manager's role, and that's where the entrepreneurial spirit comes in, and figuring the workarounds. We don't have the option of getting no. We've got to make it work, and maybe you've got it. It'll be worked in a way that you may not have anticipated, but you figure it out. You really you have to, because the career of your artist depends upon it.
Yeah, you got to figure it out, right?
And having that kind of fluid approach to things, is like, okay, that doesn't work. What else can we do to achieve the end goal is really important. And surrounding yourself with knowing who can help your team at large is really important. Being part of that collective.
Yeah, and I think Music Managers Forum is a part of that equation. I was a full-time musician for about 12 or 13 years, and I still play music. And my advice to bands or artists is to really build a team and find those resources. If you're trying to do it all on your own, it's really hard. And what you guys providing, just a global mindset of, here's some options, here are some goals to work towards, or here's some managers that can help you with those goals. Building a team even on an independent space is I just feel like now you have no choice unless you can do everything. I think there's a few people that probably can do it all, but I think to be able to grow and make it sustainable, like you need to build out a little bit of a team.
Nobody knows everybody or everything. That just doesn't exist. There's power in numbers, but you need to make sure that you have that doesn't mean you need a vast team. You just need the right team with the right knowledge and experience. and make sure that there's a nice blend within that team. And that team can start with just a friend, and help build that. And I think that's how most of us start, to be honest. Most of us kind of accidentally, well, we know we love music and then just accidentally start working with one person, and that turns into something else, or you start in one role and that grows somewhere else. And it's I think there's that term, the frenager. Well, you know what, that frenager is most probably that first person who will be your champion, and they may or may not be the person that takes you through the rest of your career. But certainly it takes a certain amount of people who are gonna champion you and be your advocate to help you break through. And it takes such a huge, I mean, the reality is there's such a huge wall of music being released every single day, that to break through and actually have a viable career. And look, there aren't that many that make it to that pinnacle of superstardom. But there is, a girth of people who make a living, and they do it through touring, through merchandise, through all of the other aspects. We have our 1%, and that's fine, but even they make a lot of money that is falling outside of the actual music. It's the branding, it's everything else that goes with it. So it's really important that we also know how to make money and how to use the music to unlock all those other avenues, and be making sure that we're getting compensated fairly and appropriately, and we also fall into the advocacy surrounding that as well. So whether it's the AMFA, which is the American Fairness Act, which we've been fighting for a while, to get artists and musicians paid for their music being paid on terrestrial radio, or whether it's trying to fix a loophole in the Music Modernization Act. There's always things to be done. So as I say, it really does come back to education, so people have the tools with which to know how to build the career, how to register their rights, collect their money, and everything that goes with it, to providing a community so people don't feel so isolated and alone, and that they do have peers around them, that they can just be there to support one another, and have that, even if it's not a formal team, people that you can just kind of run things by. What was your experience? How did that work for you? Just be able to have, we're also siloed. We don't have those water cooler moments.
Right.
So
Yeah.
being able to have that, and just, whether it's over a Zoom, a phone call, a cup of coffee, or whatever it is, to know that you're somebody you can just ask advice of, is really important. And it can be very isolating otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And, that's why, working out of 2112 and being, involved with organizations such as Music Managers Forum, the power of community is always important. It's something, especially as musicians, we need, groups to be advocating for, right, publishing and royalties. And I mean, talking with actually Brian Sykes, who commented, he said, great interview so far. You can see below. Brian and I were talking about how can be very complicated in terms of just royalties, just explaining it, just the different types. And you don't need to be an expert about it, but you need to have a working knowledge of,
Right.
the different avenues of revenue that you can get from music. And so it's important to also because there's a lot of music tools out there, right? There's a lot of tech tools that musicians can use. And I think checking in with musicians of like, how is that tool working for you, is another important one, because there's also tools that don't really work that well, right? So
and there's also tools that will cost you a lot of money.
Right.
which may or may not be the right tools for you.
Yeah.
So we try to just educate. We're very agnostic. We try to just be like, look, these are the things you need to be aware of. While we have sponsors, which obviously we rely on for the organization to exist, we very much, it's like, you have to figure out what's right for you, but know these basic things.
Yeah.
Of what you should be getting from this and what you may need to give up to achieve that. And what I will say is most of what we do is free. Our webinars are free, our summits are free, our meetups are free. So we do try to provide this level playing field for people at all levels. We obviously encourage people to become a member, because then you can have access to our directories, so you can then have that peer-to-peer access. But also we have a whole slew of benefits available for members. So that can be everything from a discount code for South by Southwest or Reeperbahn or any number of
I want to go. I want to go to Reeperbahn. I really want to check out that festival.
They're incredible. We're very grateful to have a strong relationship with them. We always try and have some presence there. I actually I've not been able to go to Reeperbahn myself, which it pains my heart. I intend to go, and I've heard nothing but amazing things. And
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to travel to many cities. Ironically, when you're on tour, you get to go to places, but you never really go to places. You're in a van, you're in a bus. If you're fortunate enough to be able to stay in a hotel, that's lovely. But you're so busy on the move that you never really get to visit places properly. And I have to say, I accidentally got stuck. I think the first time Germany had they had I was there in the middle of an airline strike.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, I'm unexpectedly in Hamburg for a day, and I had a completely delightful day in Hamburg.
Yeah. Wow.
That doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it was like there's the first point where you're annoyed because you're inconvenienced, and it's like, there's worse places to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me check it out. That's great. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's just, but anyway, yeah, I definitely want to go to Reeperbahn. There are so many conferences around the world. We've got a list at the moment that we're putting a calendar together, and we're working out discounts with most of these conferences. At the moment, is between about 80 and growing. And they're all around the world. So we, like I said earlier, it's like we have this global network. If you are having success somewhere, then you should be able to have access to those different places to go and experience them. So, just knowing about them is important, and then having hopefully an affordable way to actually go and be part of those conferences, I think are really important.
Yeah, and I'm going to put below, just so everyone can check out the website where you can get more information about Sharon's work. I have a couple more questions before we leave today. So the first one is, what would you never compromise in your own work?
Personal satisfaction. I think that's no jobs that, it's like, okay, well, maybe that was fiscally rewarding, but I got little out of it.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I love this role. I mean, when I was a manager, I loved doing that. When I was a publisher, I loved doing that. But now getting to this point, the fact that I can work in a way in which to pull upon all that experience and to help educate people, help give them a community, help to advocate for them. To me, this is kind of my dream job that I didn't even know existed. And I find that very fulfilling. I think there are when we if you don't have that, then it just makes it harder to get up in the morning and be excited about life.
I agree. And I love the fact that you can use all of your knowledge, as a former manager and in publishing to bring to the table. I think as we're building our careers, at least I'll speak for myself, as I was building my career, I didn't necessarily understand the value of all of the experiences and the networks that I had.
Yeah.
And then when you get into a position where they're like, oh, do you know these people or do you know this subject matter? And you're like, oh yeah, I definitely know that because I've been living that for 10 years or whatever. So I think it's great. I think, we're lucky to have you, Sharon, as an executive director here in the US. And so it's, it definitely feels like MMF is in good hands. So the final question for today is what book or movie or article would you recommend for our listeners to help expand their minds?
Okay, if you go to the MMF-US website, we have a resources page that I'm always adding things to. So
that's cool.
Definitely go there. We have studies, we have books, we have podcasts, we have all sorts of things. One thing that I definitely recommend the most is Emily White's book, How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams, I think is the full title. It's a long title. But I send people to that all the time. I think she's amazing. I love that she's working on her second season of her podcast. And I'm excited to see where she goes with this. And not for nothing, how incredible that she built I Voted, which I think is such an awesome platform and is just going from strength to strength and is recognizing that, an election can be decided by a small venue or a large venue, depending on the market, and being able to identify that music can be a driving force to get people to show up and vote and be part of the democratic process.
Yeah, it's great. We're
Really
going to have Emily next week on this podcast. So it's fantastic that you brought up her name, and I'm looking forward to talking about the book. And I Voted. I am absolutely inspired by, using music as a way for social change or to get people involved around a cause. It's such an important use, I think, of. I mean, I think about music and branding, and yes, it's very important. You find your brands, and a lot of songs or musicians are able to build careers off of those kind of relationships. But I also think it's important, in a community aspect of how we can, build festivals and movements around music, and not to let go of that. Well,
yeah, it's really important.
Sharon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been great to just kind of chat about the music industry. And there was another comment about Jessica Skinner saying, oh, that her mom also got stuck in Germany from an airline. Like, so it seems
also
to be.
Hamburg. It was
I don't know.
I had a great time. I sat in a restaurant by the lake and got so much work done, but I was able to just sit there and just like,
yeah. That's so funny. Well, thanks again. We'll most likely see you in South by Southwest, and we appreciate you taking the time for a Global Industry Spotlight.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And you're going to have an incredible. Now I have to tune in for Emily's interview. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. All right, take care.
Thank you.
What a great conversation with Sharon Tapper, Executive Director of the Music Managers Forum. I'm going to put below one more time just so everyone knows, MMF-US.com. That is the U.S. Part of Music Managers Forum, but it is a global community, the parent company. So check out what they're doing. They have a lot of interesting programming. I think next week they're doing one on Bandzoogle, which is going to be interesting. So definitely check that out. And And yeah, what a fun conversation. Again, my name is Daniel Crane. I am the program director at the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. And this was another episode of Global Industry Spotlight, a conversational series focused on providing resources and insight for the creative entrepreneur. We are here to connect with you, network, discuss business, and all things creative entrepreneurship. We are streaming out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. Thank you to Comcast Business and Shure for providing the tools necessary to make our programming possible. Visit cceglobal.org to register for free workshops offered by our partners. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, and tune in for the next episode of Global Industry Spotlight with Emily White, entrepreneur, author, and podcast. Wishing everyone a great end to their week, and we will speak with you soon. Take care.